Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV, another game of interplanetary I Spy going on here. Now, I'm going back over some old sols at the moment because the rover's not doing a great deal at the moment. It's kind of playing in a sand dune at the moment called Namib Dune, which you guys have probably seen. I did a video on it a while back, and I thought I'd go over some of the older stuff. There's lots of stuff still to be found in some of these older sols. Now, I've been going over Sol 67. Now, this is it on the GigaPan. Neville Thompson, another awesome job he's done here. This goes way back to the first year of the Curiosity on Mars in Gale Crater, and this is sort of around the rock nest area, one of the views from rock nest. This isn't the entire rock nest panoramic, this is just part of it, but there's some awesome stuff in here, and a lot of it is just very interestingly oddly shaped rocks, and we're probably suffering from pareidolia, as we keep being told, but I don't think all of it is. Some of these things are yet to be explained. There's lots of objects here that look like things that may actually be those things or may not be those things. They may be something else. They may just be rocks, like I said. But some of these things really don't look like rocks to me. And if you, for instance, if you were to park a car in a field of rocks next to a rock shaped like a car, or say next to two rocks that were both shaped like cars, that doesn't stop your car being a car. Just because the rocks around it look similar, say your car was covered in this sort of Martian dust, you know, and it was parked in a bunch of rocks that all looked a bit like cars, and then you went back about half a mile away and zoomed in with your camera and took a photograph, it would be very difficult to determine what you were looking at, especially covered in this sort of puke filter that NASA use on everything. Now, this is one of the images. Now, this has been covered by lots of people, various parts of this. There's a very strange object here that looks like a little person, which is probably just a rock, but who knows. But my favourite thing here is the bottle. Now, this bottle seems to have a white label on it. That was really cool. And up here, there is this thing, which is not very large. It's probably only a few feet long, maybe only a foot long from front to back, and it looks very similar or like a desiccated, dried animal corpse of perhaps a marine mammal or marine creature. There's also another thing over in this corner here, which looks like it may be a part of something. It seems to have a sort of weird bottle type tip to it, like I don't know. There's loads of weird stuff in here, and I actually think a lot of these some of these things are actually skulls and fossils. There's all sorts of weird stuff. Even right next to this bottle here, there seems to be something weird there with these weird tusk-like structures coming off of it. So I'm not going to go into all of these in great detail because I have covered a lot of this before, but I will show you a little bit. This is one of the skulls from Sol 67, and this looks like a primate skull of some kind of chimpanzee or humanoid or some kind of proto-human type biped. And you can actually see a very clear eye socket here, and there's also another one here, but which still seems to have an eyeball in it, which makes me think it's fairly fresh. But of course, things on Mars may fossilise in a very different way because of the different conditions. It's very, very cold. Although in the daytime it's fairly warm, it's about 20 degrees, but at night in the summer in this area it gets down to about -30, but even in the winter in this area it never really goes much below, I think, about -80, and that sounds a lot, but during the day it's actually quite pleasant a lot of the year round because it's right near the equator. So I would expect if there were creatures on Mars that they would have been preserved extremely well, not only because of the lack of oxygen, but also this sand is probably very saline and will act like a natural preservative. Apparently it contains quite high levels of sulfur and various other minerals as well, which will also act as a preservative. So this may explain why some of these things don't look very old. Now, this is not a brilliant example because I over-zoomed on this image. This is quite an old video. I did this a long time back, so I won't show much of that. I mean, but it does look like a skull. This nasal cavity here, and two eye sockets. This is his right eye socket, and the sort of head coming around here. But it may not be, of course. It could just be a rock. But that's the way I interpreted it. There was also this one. That's the one I showed you a second ago, which I thought looked like a desiccated hippo or similar type creature that's dead or long dead and rotting away and sort of semi-fossilized in mud, because this was a bottom of a lake, so this would have all been sticky wet mud, and when the water dried out, probably very rapidly after the cataclysm, anything that was living there would have probably died pretty sharpish and then just dried out and were preserved in the very spot where they were left, in a death posture like this. Now, this may just be a rock also, but it does seem to have ribs here, and the remains of a limb here, and a head at the front. And if you look carefully, you can see here and here, they look like two nostrils, and the mouth here. Now, this doesn't get particularly clear, so I may go over some of these again and redo some of these. I'll go over these clips again and actually bump up the enhancements a bit more, because I tend to push them a little bit harder now with the contrast. Back in those days, this is an old video from a couple of years ago. This is probably from 2013. Oh yeah, so that's 2 or 3 years ago now. So I tend to enhance things slightly better now, because my skills have got a little bit better and my presentation skills are better. So there is some crazy stuff in this area, and this was one of the things that caught my attention initially. I'll let that play through a little bit. It does show a picture of a hippo here. If you look at the hippo's nostrils and a rather sort of big mouth, and similar possibly. Now, if you imagine this on Mars, or something similar to this on Mars that dies, there's a huge cataclysm. The water in the lake bed all evaporates very rapidly in some kind of nuclear winter type scenario, and any creatures just die and freeze. This flesh would gradually rot away, but if it was covered in mud, there was enough mud around it, the mud would dry out and then act as a preservative. There are other things, like I showed you there. There's this strange thing here. Now, lots of people have gone over this rock nest area and found loads and loads of stuff, and the best thing to do is to come on the GigaPan. The GigaPan is a far more efficient way of finding anomalies and getting a sense of scale and placement for these things, because a lot of these things are quite close together. There's loads of weird stuff. Now, the recent thing I found, which has been sitting on my desktop for a while, was up here. It doesn't look much at the moment, but if you look carefully and you squint a bit, it won't go any closer than that. This looks like a head of some sort, and you can just about make out 2 eye sockets here. Now, bear in mind, as you can probably see, this image is quite badly damaged. NevT's done a good job of tidying it up a bit here, but the problem is with these Mastcam images is they are, as I've said hundreds of times before, they are downsized and downgraded, and we lose much of the detail in them. Why they do this, I still don't know. I think it's probably deliberate. So what I'll do, I'll show you a close-up of that. I've got it in my folder here, and I've already done some clips of this. Here's the raw clip. Very blurred, terrible quality, almost no detail there whatsoever. So all you can really do is really up the contrast and white balance it like I've done here. And what I've done here, that looks a bit extreme. Let's go back to this one. What I've done here is I really darkened the contrast to bring out the detail here, and there seems to be a nose, 2 eyes, and a mouth with something strange coming out of the mouth, like some kind of apparatus or perhaps even some kind of plant or something like that. Now, this may well just be a rock. This may well just be pareidolia, and some of this information may be down to the way the image has been damaged and degraded. Because you can see these lines going through it, which kind of correspond with these eye sockets, unfortunately, possible eye sockets. So there we go. I mean, I'll show you that. That's where I've just kind of gone in with the darken tool and darkened it around here just to give some detail. But it's a long way off, this thing, and it's too ambiguous because it's not close enough to get any true detail from, and there's little to be gained from this sort of practice, really. I usually avoid things that are that far away, but I thought I'd show it anyway because it's been sitting around on my desktop for months now, and I thought I'd get round to showing people what I found here. There's loads of weird stuff here. there's that kind of hippo-like thing. I'll show you this enhancement because that's kind of cleared it up a bit. This is the black grayscale I've done here, and you can see what looks like a mouth and some nostrils. I mean, that also may just be a rock, but it does look to me like there are ribs sticking out here. I mean, it's a kind of tangled mess, and if there were limbs on this thing, which they may have been, one here and one here, perhaps, they may have been eroded or chewed off or whatever by rodents or something else. And there do seem to be rodents on Mars. At least there were. Whether they're there now and they're alive, I don't know. The thing is, we do keep finding things that look like animal corpses and skulls all over the place, but we're not finding any tracks. Now, is that because the rover images are too poor, or because the tracks are so small? We don't know. I would expect if there were living creatures up in Gale Crater that we would at some point see some tracks in this sand, because this sand is pretty much everywhere, and a creature would leave nice clear tracks in it. It's very fine sand. Now here's that bottle. I'm just going to show you this bottle just here. Now I haven't done anything to this. It's completely raw, this image. It looks like a bottle with a label just here. So that's one of my favourite ones. I think other people have covered this as well. Lots of people have done videos on this particular area. There's so much to see here. And there's loads of weird structures in here. I mean, this looks strange. There's blocks, cut stone blocks. There's loads of these crazy looking rocks that kind of look like creatures, but most of them probably are not. So there we go. Let's have a look at some other clips I've got here. Let's go back to the GigaPan, actually, because the GigaPan is actually a much more efficient way of doing this. Because otherwise, if you can kind of get a very distorted sense of scale if you don't use the GigaPan as well. Because the GigaPan, it really gives you an idea that actually most of these rocks are very small and probably only a few inches across. And my graphics card seems to be struggling with this for some reason. So what's going on there? Okay, so yeah, I mean, there was something over here as well in the bottom left corner, which I thought looked like a possible animal skull here, with a lower jaw here. You can see like the upper... I mean, what this is, I don't know. It looks a bit like an eye socket here, and this could be the sort of nose end of a skull. I don't know. It may not be. Just could be a rock. But there are many, many things like that here. And just because most of these are rocks, it doesn't mean that all of them are. Some of these things may well be actual skulls. There was another area which was my favourite spot. I'll try and get to it with... the damn graphics card. Right, let's just do that. It's because I'm running lots of stuff here. Okay, where was it? Up here somewhere. There we go. There was some crazy stuff up here. This was my favourite spot. And there looks like to be some kind of weird possible skull here with an eye socket. Just here. But that also may be a rock. And there was something weird on top of this rock, which I thought looked really strange. It's got some strange bits coming out of it and details. Now some of this actually may just be rocks with organic material on them, or fossilized marine creatures like possible brain coral and that kind of thing. I have found, let me quickly show you whilst I'm here, I did actually have what looked like some brain coral in this area as well. Now here it is. I may as well chuck this in whilst I'm here. Now this is from PIA 19662, which is a much more recent image, so it's quite a long way off from the rock nest area that I just showed you. And there's this thing. Now I don't know if it's going to let me show you these because for some reason the computer is not recognizing them. So what I'll do, I'll just show you this first. It doesn't look much right now, but when you brighten this up, it has some very interesting details in it. And you can see actually the image is corrupted a bit there, so when I copied it, it must have gone a bit haywire. Here's some brain coral. Now, I actually think a lot of the things we're seeing is possible ancient brain coral, or the remains of it, the calcified remains or skeleton of these creatures. And these often look like skulls, and I actually think a lot of the time this is what we're looking at. This is a very good example here. Now, when these die off, you get left with a sort of a calcium-based bony core of these things, which kind of look a bit like skulls, and they can make some very, very interesting organic-looking shapes. And I really do think a lot of the things we're seeing on the surface of Mars are exactly that, especially in this area, because, of course, this was once full of water. So I would fully expect there to be types of coral or primitive creatures that were living on the bottom of this lake bed. Now, it may well have been salt water, it may have been fresh water, but either way, there may well have been many, many different types of coral and creature living here that we know nothing of. So when looking at these rocks, you've really got to look at them with an open mind and imagine the many, many thousands of types of coral we have on Earth, and many millions of types of marine creatures we have on Earth. And imagine some of them on Mars. I mean, some of them may well be similar, some of them may be very, very different. So we have to keep an open mind. There are too many people on YouTube saying, oh, this is just a rock, that's just a rock. Well, how do you know? There may well be types of creatures there which are basically types of rock. And in fact, arguably, you could say that a fossil is actually a rock, because that's exactly what a fossil is. So people are very quick to dismiss these things and throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, it may well be the case that most of these are rocks, but when you have things like this, which look like they've got a label on, and stuff like that, I mean, you've got to start asking some questions. This is too ambiguous because it's too far away. This is a prime example of a part of Gale Crater that is absolutely rich in anomalies. I'm not saying all these are anomalies, but they're certainly very interesting. And a lot of these rocks look like bits of pottery. Some of them look like they've been cut stone blocks from parts of buildings. There are bits of foundations all over the place. People are starting to realise this now, and a lot of us researchers have been saying this for years. And if we were right about the water in this area, which I and many others determined years ago, just by looking at what looked like marine fossils, if we were right about that, then we may well be right about many other things as well. So do also bear that in mind. So I'm going to stop now because for some reason my graphics card is struggling with this, even though it's a brand new one. I don't know what's going on there. So thanks for watching, everybody. What I'll do, I'll go through this whole area. I'll clip out all the interesting possible anomalies and put them in at the end of the video for you. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you soon.